Good morning, Mr. Richards. We cordially invite you to our school, Wattle Grove Primary.
Thank you very much, guys. It's an absolute pleasure to see and meet all of you guys. This is fantastic. I can't get over how excited you all are. Please don't call me Mr. Richards. I know it's a thing with teachers and that sort of stuff, but I'm not a teacher. My name's Josh, so feel free to call me Josh. That's fine.
Thanks.
I'm guessing you guys know why I'm here. Yeah. Okay, cool. So who can tell me what Mars One's about? Down the front.
It's about getting humans to live on Mars and just explore it and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm involved with an organisation that's going to be sending people to Mars in about 10 years' time. There were 200,000 people that applied to be involved with it. They're slowly cutting that group down. They'll eventually send just 4 people. At the moment, there's 700 of us that are still in left. So there's about 27 Australians. I'm one of them. And they'll be bringing it down to just 4 people who go in about 10 years' time. I'm going to plug in. I'm guessing you've all got a mountain of questions, though. So rather than me show you too many pictures, I'm going to start while that loads. Who's got a question? You had one before, but you were probably the second with your hand up. Yeah.
When people go to Mars, are they going to stay there forever?
So yeah, when we go, we'll stay there for good. Part of the reason why we have to go there and stay is a little bit to do with physics and a little bit to do with engineering. So any guesses why we would have to stay there? You're going to have your hand up the entire time today, aren't you? Yeah. Not enough fuel. So yeah, exactly. One of the big problems that we have is we have to take enough fuel to then launch from Mars to get back again. And if you launch with lots of fuel, you then have to use more fuel to get that fuel up into space in the first place. So there comes a limit where you can't send enough fuel to get back. What's another reason why we might not be able to come back?
Well, the whole project, just getting to Mars, didn't it cost roughly $6 billion?
Yeah, so cost is another reason.
Yep.
Yeah, $6 billion.
And so then double that
Yeah.
for the way home, and it'll cost $12 million.
I tell you what, it's a lot more than $12 billion
Really?
to come back. It's a lot more.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
is it?
So there were a couple of different plans through the last 30 years where people have talked about going to Mars and then coming back to Earth. NASA, the guys in the US who went to the moon and all that sort of stuff, they came up with a plan in the mid-80s, so about the time I was born, about 30 years ago, where they turned around and they worked out how to go to Mars and come back, but it was going to cost nearly $500 billion. So not $6 billion, not $12 billion, about $460 billion. So if you get an idea, the entire US, like the 270 million people that live in the US, they generate about $1 trillion. So it's half of what the US makes every year. So not going to happen. Someone else came up with another plan a few years later that would have meant that instead of just going to Mars and staying there for 2 weeks, the astronauts would stay there for 2 years. That was going to cost $60 billion to go there and come back. And they wouldn't have been able to test the technology beforehand. There's one more reason why we can't come back.
It's going to be the food issue, the food getting there, and then the used food for coming back.
So food is going to be an issue, but that's not it's not going to stop us from going, because we could actually grow plants that would get us back again, or we could take enough to get back. It might be a challenging one. Why don't both of you? The furthest at the back. Yeah, true. That's that cost thing again, that space shuttle issue.
Because of the heat or the temperature?
The temperature is going to be challenging, but it's going to be less of a problem on Mars than it is in space.
Takeoff?
Takeoff, yeah. Takeoff's a little bit. I'll give you a hint. It has to do with what happens to our bodies when we're in space. You've been waiting.
It's because you guys normally when people go out into space, they become so thin, and then when you come back, you most probably be a skeleton.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Because the air in Mars is actually toxic air, you'll be in a special suit that you are able to breathe through.
So there's a couple of factors there. You're dead on with that one, and that adds to it as well. The biggest problem is when we're in 0G, when we're up in space itself, where there's no gravity, our bones aren't doing any work. So when you walk around normally, you're putting pressure on your bones, and that makes them work all the time. If you take that pressure off, if you float around all the time, your bones don't have to do any work, so they get weaker. They get much more brittle. One of the problems that we have with astronauts that go up to the International Space Station for about 6 months at a time, they come back and they basically collapse because they're not used to being in 1G of gravity. So we're quite comfortable walking around here. Astronauts, when they come back, pass out, they collapse, they have all sorts of problems. Really, really fit, healthy people just falling down because they're not used to being in a gravity situation. If we go to Mars for several years, our bodies will adapt to that and we may never be able to adjust to coming back to Earth. So even if we had the technology, we had the money, lots of stuff, our bodies are what the biggest problem is. But that's awesome. You've already got a question ready to go.
I was just saying, with that, can't you actually attach like straps to you that gives you the same amount of pressure, and you can do exercises on your capsule or anything?
Very true. Very, very true. So what a lot of astronauts do, they spend a lot of time doing exercise. There is a university in England at the moment that's just come up with this very special suit. You ever seen the Lycra suits that runners wear?
Yep.
Very similar to one of those. It's got straps that go underneath their feet and it puts pressure on the whole body. It tries to squash your body down so you have to work all the time. So astronauts in space wander around wearing this suit and it gives their body a workout all the time. That sort of thing will help, but over the period that we're talking about, it's still going to be a problem. Because you're gone for so long, you're still going to have problems with your body. You might be able to adjust, but we don't know for sure. Cool. Up the back.
Would you get bored staying in Mars forever?
Who would like to live the rest of their life in a room about as big as this one? If it's on Mars. Yeah, okay. Who'd go crazy living in a room this big? Yeah. So there's not a lot of space to run around, there's not a lot of space to move out. Boredom is a really, really big issue. Like, you guys are really excited about the idea of going to space and Mars and all this stuff, but space is really boring. Really boring. Because you're trapped inside a little capsule, you don't have a lot of space, you're looking at the same 3 people for 2.5 years. And then at the end of those 2.5 years, you get 4 more people. Doesn't get much better. Doesn't improve at all. So you have to be able to look after yourself. You have to be able to entertain yourself. You have to be the kind of person who's quite comfortable working in a group, but also the kind of person who is quite comfortable being entirely by themselves, sitting in a room quietly and reading somewhere for like 6 months. One of the ways we test that, that's your dream, that's brilliant. One of the ways we can test that, who's got an idea of how we could maybe test how well people handle boredom beforehand?
Maybe you could like have a place where there's like what the conditions would be like in space, and where you could.
Spot on, and I'm going to show you a picture of it. Let's go to simulation outpost. Right. Now, I'll show you a picture shortly of what it's going to look like when it's on Mars, but this is what we call a simulation outpost. It's probably going to be built in a place called the Atacama Desert, which is in Chile. It's the driest place on Earth. Well, besides Antarctica. But yeah, it's very, very dry. There's been no rain on the Atacama Desert for about 10,000 years. So it's really, really dry. This grassy stuff down here, it's just been added in by the computer. It's not actually there. It's just blank. The idea being that we stick people in there for 3 or 4 months and we see how they go. What they've done is, through a lot of previous testing, there's been some what they call Mars analogues in places like Russia and Antarctica. They stick people in there for a few months and they've worked out that we can find out what kind of person you are by putting you in one of these sort of things for about 3 months. They don't have to put them in there for longer. They don't have to go for 6 months. Some people have gone in there for a couple of years. They don't need to do that. They need to find out after about 3 months. That's all it takes. So, closest to me.
Is it about everyone gets along?
So each person's got their own room. So what I'll do, these capsules, so you understand, these capsules are about the size of this room. So that one there is about the same height as the air vents up the top there. So they're quite big, but they've got lots of technology and stuff inside them. There's lots of insulation, so there's not a lot of room. But if you look over the back here, they've got big inflatable habitats inside, and they have got a lot more space inside them. They expand outwards, so they fill them with air or fill them with carbon dioxide or whatever, and they expand out from there. And what we'll do eventually is we'll cover them with dirt, because that's where we're going to live. So there we go, and that's what they look like on the inside. Yeah. So there's your beds, your little lounge room, extra equipment. What's on the end there? Plants. So who was asking me earlier on about how you would grow your own food? Yeah. What they're going to do in there, who here's heard of hydroponics? Few of you? Does anyone know what hydroponics are?
Is it where plants grow in like water?
Pretty much. So if you have a look, I don't think I've got a better picture than that, unfortunately, but it's where you grow plants without any soil. They literally have the roots and they're in the water. It takes a lot of practice. There's only a few plants that they can do it with, but they're learning all the time how to do it with more and more plants. So hydroponics is probably the way that we'll grow a lot of our food, and it's the way we'll stay alive. How are we going to get meat? This will be interesting. Doesn't matter? Next year?
Maybe get some meat from Earth and
It's a trick question. There's no food, guys. There's no meat up there, guys. Who knows what a vegan is? Yeah. I love bacon and eggs. I have bacon and eggs for breakfast every morning because I know if I go to Mars, I'll never get to have it ever again. There's no meat, so we'll have to grow all of our food. We might have some packaged stuff, but most of it is going to be grown.
Are you going to have dehydrated vegetables as well?
We probably will have dehydrated vegetables, but ideally we'd grow our own vegetables. The idea would be to take food that we can't grow, like meats, and grow everything else. So before we get another question, there's something else. So that's... And that's back to the start there. Now, it's a double bed. Why would we give every single person a double bed? Who am I going to ask?
Because whilst you're in there, you're probably going to have to still be wearing the suit, so your suits will probably be quite big.
True. It's got to do with space. It does have to do with space, but it's not to do with your suits. This is all pressurised, so this would be very similar to what we're walking around in now. Another one. Any guesses?
because you might roll around a bit.
If you're going to be, if you want to roll around, that's true. It's true. If you're going to be living for the rest of your life in a room about this big, wouldn't you at least want to have a double bed? Yeah. Right, have a bit of space and a bit of comfort. This is set up for each individual astronaut. They need the space because this is all you can walk outside in a suit, but this is what you're going to be living in most of the time. This is what's going to be underground, protected from the radiation under soil. So, yeah, right in the middle there.
What if you have a shower?
Can we have a shower?
Yeah.
I think it's because like in space there are no dirty things like or bacteria or
We're still going to have all of that. We're filthy. Human beings are disgusting. We are. We're covered in bacteria. Awful. Absolutely awful. If you ever do a biology test where you rub the inside of your mouth with a cotton swab and put it on a mixture called agar and you grow it, within a day or two, it'll be covered in bacteria. It'll be disgusting. So human beings are quite ick. That's why we get sick. Why can we take a shower? No. Why can't we take a shower? Calm down. Yes, you.
Okay, but so I'm so excited. But well, you wouldn't be able to take a shower because of gravity. Both gravity and the fact that they don't really know, but so far there's no water.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are two issues. But the main one is that with gravity the water would just go.
Very true. We can still work around that though with the gravity. They had a shower on Mir, which is the old Russian space station. Didn't work really well. They had to get in like a big bathtub type thing and put a rubber fitting around the outside of them. And they'd kind of wash down and then they get underneath and wash underneath. So they still kind of have a shower that way. We're not going to have a shower on Mars. Yeah. Yeah. The reason why we're not going to have a shower on Mars is because of the water. There is water in the soil. We can get the water out of the soil, but the biggest problem with it is there's not very much. And we need to use water for other things. We need to use it for growing our plants. There's no shower on the International Space Station. So when the astronauts go up there for 6 months, they don't have showers either. How would they stay clean though? All those bugs we were talking about before are still there. How do you stay clean?
Hydration, like you know those wipes you can get? You can just like clean yourself.
Who's been to KFC? Yeah? You ever seen the little sachets they give you for cleaning your hands afterwards? That's your shower. So you have them and you wipe yourself down with them. The ones that we have are a bit bigger. They're a bit more space in them. They've got a bit more moisture and there's antibacterial things in it. But it's basically the same thing. Open it up, wipe yourself down. And that's how you stay clean. Yeah. Hang on.
What would you do if you found any non-human life?
What would you guys do if you found non-human life? Scream? I'll ask another question on the back of that. What kind of life would you expect to find on Mars? Green ones? I'm going to find someone who hasn't. Right up the back there. Yeah. Aliens, but what would they look like? Big green antennas. So yeah, right in the middle there. No, you that's just turned around. Yep. There we go. Microscopic. So Mars looks the way that it looks for about 2 billion years now. Our Earth has changed massively in 2 billion years, but Mars has looked very much the same. It's cooled down, all that sort of thing. There's no atmosphere. There's lots of radiation. There's not a lot of water. So anything that survives is got to be very, very small. We probably would have spotted big green aliens as well by this stage. We've sent enough probes, we've sent enough things, we probably would have seen them, unless they're hiding or something like that. Not likely. So, when we go to places like the Atacama, where is it? The Atacama Desert? There's no green stuff like this, but there's still life. So if we go there, it hasn't rained for 10,000 years, but there's still life. Underneath all the rocks, there's greeny moss. There's lots of stuff like bacteria and things like that are growing there as well. So we think there's a really good chance if we go to Mars that even though it's irradiated, there's all sorts of problems. It's really cold. Who was talking to me about the cold before? There you are. You asked me about heat and cold. It's really, really cold on Mars. What's the coldest anyone here has ever been?
-6.
-6? Who can beat -6? Yeah?
I'm from Scotland, so it was like -10.
-10? Where were you at -30? Norway, rock and roll. Okay, who can beat -30 degrees? -31. Where were you for -31? Any guesses what the coldest I've ever been?
-50.
You close? Nah, too far.
-55.
I'll give it to you. It's -56.
Really?
Any guesses where I would have felt -56? Not Mars. Not Antarctica. I probably would have felt it if I'd gone to Antarctica. Behind you? In a freezer. I've been to -30 in a freezer. In a simulator? No, this is a real world place here on Earth. It's not been faked. It's a real natural environment. In Russia, no. I'll give it to you. It's in Africa. Wow. Who here's heard of Mount Kilimanjaro? Mount Kilimanjaro gets fairly cold. It gets to, in terms of altitude, it's the tallest freestanding mountain in the world. It's a big volcano. It starts in the tropics. It starts where you have to be taking tablets to make sure you don't get malaria from the mosquitoes. And it gets to -56 when you get to the top. You go up nearly 6 kilometres up into the air. My dad and I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro about 7 years ago. And when we went up there, there was 130 people that tried to climb it that day. From the summit, you start just below the summit, you try and get up to the top. There was 130 people that tried to get up, and there were 6 of us that got up that day. Because we were climbing through a blizzard. So we got up to the top, but there was only 6 of us that got up to the top that day, and it was primarily because of the wind. It was cold, it was -25, but there was then a 31 degree wind chill on the top of it as well. So it was cold already, and then there was huge winds that were cooling us down as well. I have no idea how we got onto that story, but who's got it? You've got a question at the back.
All that luxury on Mars, do you have an Xbox or Wi-Fi?
I reckon we could do the Xbox. We can't do the Wi-Fi. Why can't we do the Wi-Fi? And it finds right in the middle there.
There would be no internet connection due to the not very much network.
Pretty much. So we will still have internet. We'll still be able to send emails and things like that. If I jump on the internet, if I'm sitting in one of these capsules on Mars, not here, but on Mars, and I try and access a web page, it takes light. So light is the fastest thing in the universe. It takes light about 20 minutes to go from Mars to Earth to request that information and say, this is the web page I want to look at. And it then takes another 20 minutes for it to get back. So you can literally click on a link and sit there and wait 40 minutes for the message to come back. Yeah. Who's got an idea of how we can get around that? Pre-download stuff. It's called caching. So what we do is we cache the websites that we're interested in, or we send an email back to Earth that takes 20 minutes and says, okay, I want to watch the grand final when it comes out. I want to watch this, I want to watch Gravity, I want to watch this movie, I want to watch this TV show, rah, rah, rah. And as it comes out, they send it to us, ready to go. They've already got the messages ready to go. So they cache that information and send it to us. It still takes that amount of time to get it to us, but we've got it ready so we don't have to turn around and go, oh, I want to watch this right now, and it takes 40 minutes for it to come around.
What are you allowed to take?
What are we allowed to take? What would you guys take if you're going to Mars? Let's grab some hands. That one. Some sort of gaming device? Yeah, to get around the boredom that we talked about before? Yeah, absolutely. What would you take? Take a photo of your family to keep in mind? A koala suit. So you guys have met Keith, the anger management koala then. Keith's not really for kids. Yeah, don't go digging too far down that rabbit hole. Anyway, koala hole, whatever. Some other ideas. What else? What would you take? Take what? You'd take your cat? Why couldn't you take your cat? There's no cat suits. We could probably make a cat suit, but you don't want to really take a cat because then you've got to feed it, you've got to look after it. We're going to be struggling to be looking after the 4 people as it is. Who else has got some suggestions? What would you take? Everything. What's in your room? A whole bunch of stuff. Okay, I've got another question for you. When astronauts go up to the space station, how much can they take? Sorry? 16s?
6 items.
Oh, 6 things. Okay. Yeah, that's one. But what if those 6 things were like an elephant and a koala suit? Nothing? That's a possibility. That's a possibility. You could take nothing. Clothing? Yeah, you could take clothing. So, rather than getting stuck on the numbers of things that you can take, what are some other issues? Someone just said weight. Where? Put your hand up. You just said weight. Yeah, so weight. Weight's the issue. How much does it take? How much does it cost to send 1 kilogram into space? $1? You're close. It's about $10,000 per kilo. It's very expensive. Really, really expensive. So hang on a sec before we go and quit. So, if you're taking stuff that is $10,000 per kilo and you've only got a limited amount of space, yourself is included. That still costs $10,000 a kilo. Yeah. Space is really expensive. It's really expensive. It's really boring. So you want to take small, light things. If I was going to be going to Mars, I'd take something like a tablet that it's nice and light, I can write on, and I can read my books on. Rather than taking real physical books, I'd take a tablet so that I could read stuff off that. I'd take something like... No, I don't need undies. Don't need undies. It's fine. Don't need them. Yeah. I got another question for you. There was about 100 years ago, there were some people going and exploring Antarctica, and they ran into a really big problem. Pop your hands down for a minute. They ran into a big problem. Their ship got caught in ice before they got to Antarctica. Oh yeah. Yeah. Who can tell me who I'm talking about?
The guy from
Close. What you? Titanic? No. It is about 100 years ago, though. You're right. It's called Ernest Shackleton. Ernest Shackleton was an Antarctic explorer. Their ship, he'd been down there several times before, but they got caught in ice before they went. They got stuck in the ice before they could actually even get to Antarctica properly. They got frozen in. Their ship couldn't move through. They unloaded and got everything out onto the ice, and then slowly as the winter got worse, the ice crushed their ship. Now, this is 100 years ago. There's no planes to go down there and pick them up. There was no radios to message through. Don't worry about that. No way to contact anyone to say that they were in trouble. They were literally stuck on the ice. Shackleton made his men get rid of everything except what they were wearing, and a few other bits and pieces. Any guesses what one of the most important things they took with them was? You were quickest. Water bottles? Well, you could get water from all the ice. A banjo. Exactly. And you got it as well. They took a banjo, so like you all know what a banjo is, stringed instrument? Yeah, cool. They took a banjo. The reason why is they needed to keep the guys happy, keep them sane, because if you were stuck on the ice, they was there for 2 years. And the only way they escaped eventually was they dragged their lifeboats hundreds of kilometres across the ice, and then they rowed hundreds more to get to an isolated island, and then they had to hike 100 kilometres over the top of this island to get to one tiny little whaling station. But they took a banjo with them to stay sane, because they have a bit of fun. Even though when things are going horribly, horribly wrong, you still had a bit of a laugh. So I'd take my little ukulele with me, and I'd probably take a harmonica as well, or I'd make someone else take a harmonica. Small stuff that you can have a bit of fun with.
Do you think you'd ever feel like you were in confined?
So, like, feeling claustrophobic from being inside? Yeah, probably. But one of the things you want, the people they want to send, are the people who feel that, accept it, and know that that's the environment they're in. Sometimes you're stuck in a situation where you don't have any control. You are isolated. You are claustrophobic. And some people, that drives them crazy. And other people, they learn to adjust and they evolve. And that 3 months that we were talking about being stuck in the Atacama is about finding out from that. You got one.
Sorry, I've just been thinking about this though. Can I just ask, what does your family think about this idea of like your mum and dad or your brother, like your son going away, never coming back? Obviously they're supporting you in this decision, but how hard was it to get them to accept it, or what do they think of it?
If any of you guys turned around to your parents and said, I'm going to go to Mars, I was living in England. I was living in England when I found out about this. I had been working over in England for about 4 years. I'd been working with an organisation called the Royal Marine Commandos, who is a British military unit. And I'd left them. I'd then gone and started working in comedy for a few years, and I'd also worked for a British artist who does all kinds of weird and wonderful things. I was a little bit lost, and I didn't really know where my life was going, and I found out about Mars One, and all of a sudden everything fell into place. I knew that the work I'd done with the military, the work I'd done in comedy, the work I'd done in art, in science, all these sort of things all of a sudden fell into one place. So to me, it seemed like the perfect thing. And I got really excited, and I wrote an entry on my website, and it was called there is only do, there is no try. And I really excitedly posted on the website, and my mum read it. And I got a really frantic phone call from my mum. And it very quickly became a phone call from my dad instead, because she handed the phone over because she couldn't talk to me. She was really, really upset. My dad kind of understood where I was coming from. He kind of understood the appeal, why it was exciting, the same way you guys are excited now. He could kind of get that. My mum, the only thing she could think of was she's losing her son. And her son is going to essentially die in 10 years' time. That's the way that she was thinking about it. It's the way you have to think about it. You cut all ties. It is like having someone die, so they leave forever, and all you ever get are these memories, these videos sent back, these emails that aren't they're not really there. So my mum really struggled with it. Since then, 18 months later, they've basically inverted. So my mum is now my biggest supporter. She sees why this is important. She understands how seriously I take it. She looks at all the work that I've done over that, coming and talking to you guys about space, all that sort of thing. She sees all of that. On the opposite side, my dad has now started to realise just how serious I am about it. It's not just some pipe dream. It could really, really happen. And he's starting to come to terms with the idea that he's going to lose his son in 10 years' time. So it's been an interesting year and a half, and I'm sure it's going to be an interesting 10 years ahead as well as all of this starts to happen. At the end of the day, my parents are very, very supportive, and they're really glad that I've found something that brings me alive, that it gets me a chance to talk to kids and sort of inspire you guys and all that sort of thing. Both of them wish that I could find something that was this exciting and inspiring on Earth, but they also recognise that this is something that I have to do, that I think is important. It's more important than me. I think this is more important than all of us. So that's why I signed up, and that's why they accept it. You had a question here before. Yes? No? Forgotten. That's all right. You got one though. Yep. Electricity. Right. Electricity. That's a good question. What are some of the options we've got for electricity? It's right though. So, yeah. Solar panels. So you can see them down here. I didn't include another picture. There's another picture that shows all the solar panels. It's huge. Like, absolutely. It's huge. There's another picture. There's another picture zoomed out much further that shows you how much solar panels we need to take. What are some other options that we could have for power on Mars?
You could take some bikes that make electricity.
Pedal bikes? It's not a silly idea. What we do, we wouldn't want to run a base on something like that, but we could definitely redirect the power from the bikes into the batteries so that we're then adding to it. So when we do all that exercise and we're converting the food that we eat into energy, it goes back into the system.
I was thinking because Mars has a lot of wind and sandstorms, we might have extra durable windmills.
True, very true. One of the problems with using wind is, yeah, there's a lot of windstorms and it whips everything up really hot. The atmosphere is really, really thin. The reason why we have to wear spacesuits when we go outside is because it's 6% of what it is here on Earth. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but when we talk about, is it 6%? Less than 6%. It's 0.6%. So it's less than 1% of the air that we have here. So put that in comparison, it would take about 200 breaths for every single breath that we take to get the same amount of oxygen. It's just not there. So when we talk about wind power, yes, it can whip up all the dust and all that sort of thing. There's not a lot of actual gas to turn the wind. So, but it is a good idea. It's not a silly suggestion at all. Other ideas for generating power?
Renewable energy?
Yeah, solar power is renewable. Yeah. Other stuff, so other renewable energy ideas are things like geothermal, where we drill down into the core and we use the heat. The problem with that on Mars is pretty cold. And Mars hasn't moved very much, like I said, for about 2 billion years. So the core is pretty cool. There might be a little bit of heat, but there's not a lot. Potatoes. We could get power from potatoes. It's true. It's very true. But the power we get from potatoes is biochemical power. It doesn't generate very much, and we can generate a lot more from solar panels than we could from potatoes. But it'd be cool because we could eat them. I'll give it to you. The other option that we have is nuclear power. Why wouldn't we want to take nuclear power to Mars, right at the back?
Because we'll put Mars.
Nuclear power is pretty clean, but it's pretty dangerous. That's the problem. Some of the nuclear power systems we've got are very, very, very safe, but the stuff in the middle of it is still very dangerous, very toxic to people. So if it's not so much about having nuclear power on Mars is the problem, that wouldn't be a problem. The problem would be getting nuclear power to Mars, because you're literally putting a nuclear reactor in a rocket and firing it up into the sky.
That's very rude.
It's a little bit scary. When do you think the last time a rocket exploded? 1985. Any earlier than that? More recent than that? 2011. More recent than that? Last year. More recent than that? This year. That's true. How recently?
Yesterday.
3 days ago. There was a Russian rocket carrying a satellite that blew up 3 days ago. It literally exploded. So stuff still goes wrong. Things still happen. So solar panels, if we send a bunch of solar panels up in a rocket engine, or on a rocket, and it explodes, there's a bit of glass, things, there's dangerous stuff, but it's not radioactive stuff. Yeah. So that's why we're not sending. It's not because radioactive power or energy is necessarily dangerous on its own, because it's very, very efficient, but the risk is getting it there in the first case, in case something goes wrong. Questions? Right at the back there. Yep, yep. What happens if you want to go to the toilet? The inevitable astronaut question. What happens if Keith the koala wants to go to the toilet? Yeah. There's two problems with it. There's two elements here. Who can tell me how much gravity there is on Mars? No, they're still sticking down. Still sticking down, yeah?
38%.
Wow, you know your stats. Yeah, 38%. I was going to say 1/3, but you're dead right. It's 38%. Okay, so there is a little bit of gravity on Mars. Not as much. So if, like, I weigh about 66 kilos, on Mars, I would weigh... Yeah, 22 kilos on Mars. So 1/3 basically, or probably closer to what you were saying, probably about 25 kilos. So not a lot, but it's there. That's why we could still probably have a shower on Mars if we wanted to, because the water droplets are still going to fall down. When we're talking about going to the toilet on Mars, it's very much the same. It's very much the same as what it is here. Things still fall downwards. That's the concern. Stuff still falls down. What do you think happens in space? Doesn't go down, just floats around. How do we get around that? Because you still got to go to the toilet in space. How do you get around that? Open a door. Don't open any doors in space. Spacesuits on? How? Yeah. Well, who said nappy? Yeah, that's an option. That's what the, you know, the guys who walk outside on the International Space Station where they're crawling around and stuff. They're wearing great big nappies. They have to, because there's no toilet. You can't just go inside and go. They're out there for about 8 to 9 hours at a time. So that's all you've got. You've got to use a nappy. We don't have to use a nappy on the space station, though. There are actual toilets. How do you think they would work? Yeah, that's right. You're right. Suction cups, yeah. So that's a bit weird, but that's the way that it works. So on the old on the actual space shuttle, when the space shuttle was still flying, they had a special toilet on it that used air that would flow downwards. So you'd use the toilet and the airflow would force everything down because there's no gravity pulling it down, so they would use airflow. But they're still pretty dangerous and they're still pretty scary, to be honest with you. Right, mountains of questions in amongst here. Let's go right in the middle. You. No, one forward. You, yeah.
What if someone committed a crime on Mars?
What if, okay, someone asked me, have you been asked this for a little while? Yeah, cool, okay. What could you do? Eat them. Brilliant. Yeah, at least then you wouldn't have to worry about meat. You wouldn't have to be vegan anymore. But it's a good question. What could you do? Okay, I'll ask another question. What could anyone else do? Kill them? Yeah? Turn them into fertilizers? There's a theme here. You laugh. It's not a silly idea. It's not a silly idea. I know it's gruesome, but we've got... What do you do if someone dies? You're not going to eat them. You're not going to eat them. But you're left, if someone dies, you're left with a body. And what do you do with that? What do you do with it? So you could use them as fertilizer. It's a real thing. Like, it sounds really gruesome, but this is the sort of stuff you have to think about. You can't just turn around and go, oh, we'll bury them outside because of all those bacteria that we're talking about. We're out there looking for life. If you then dump a bunch of bacteria out into the soil, you then can't tell whether or not it's Martian life or Earth life. So, answering your question, what they could do, not a lot. You're talking about 4 people on Mars. So those 4 people have to work out amongst themselves as a team what they would do. Is it still a crime if it's on Mars? Yeah, it is. But then how do you enforce it? So different countries all around the world have different laws for different things. So the 4 people who go would have to work out their own rules. They'd have to work out their own laws and what their punishments are and how you then enforce that. So there's a lot of questions. It would boil down to how the 4 people wanted to work amongst themselves. Someone new who hasn't... Yeah, you.
You could, like, not let them out of their room.
True, you could lock them up. You could lock them up. Why would we maybe not do that? Sanity? Yeah, yeah.
Maybe they would, well, they still have all the good they've got all the devices and the food and everything.
Well, not just that. Maybe they're a really useful person. Maybe they're the doctor. Maybe they're the engineer. Maybe they're all sorts of different things. You need to use all the people that you've got because there's only 4 of you. So you need all the people. So those 4 people that go have to trust each other really, really well. So one of the reasons why we wouldn't expect a crime on Mars is because those 4 people are all relying on each other to stay alive every single day. There's no point hurting someone else because if you hurt them, you're then reducing your chance of surviving. So, well, yeah, that's all right. Yeah, you had one before.
What happens if you're a kid and you want to apply? If it's in 10 years' time, then you would be older. Would you be allowed to?
No. Aww. You have to be 18 to apply. As soon as you're 18, you can apply. Why would we make it 18? Why would we turn around and say that you have to be 18?
Because some kids aren't responsible.
Pretty much. So you guys are all excited. You're all, yeah, space is amazing and that sort of stuff. Some of the stuff that we were just talking about before about using people for fertilizer and things like that, that's really quite adult decisions. That's stuff that, to be honest with you, like, you guys are very mature and you're very excited, but that's some really heavy stuff to be dealing with. That's some really difficult... To give you an idea, I don't think I really grew up. I didn't grow up properly, and I'm still growing up in many ways. I didn't grow up properly until I was maybe 24 or 25. And I say that, you laugh, I say that because, pop your hands down for a minute, I've got another story for you. I didn't really grow up until I had other people's lives in my hands. I didn't really grow up until I had to do some things that risked my own life to save other people's lives. So when I was talking about working with the Royal Marine Commandos in the UK, 3 of my friends nearly died one night from hypothermia. They nearly froze. And there was no one else around to look after them. I was the only person who was there. I had hypothermia as well, but I was the best one that was the most healthy person there. And they were all going to die if I didn't do something. And until that happened, until I realised that their life was in my hands and I had that kind of responsibility, I didn't really know what it was like. When we go to Mars, it'll be a very similar thing. We're all looking after each other. We all have to look after each other. There'll be times when my life might be at risk and someone else has to look after me. So it's about learning how to work in a team and being able to do that sort of stuff. And in many ways, you guys are still learning that. Still at school. Part of going to school is about learning to work with other people. Someone who's from this country or this place or whatever, you have to learn how to do that. And it takes time. And sometimes, in a case like me, I was pretty irresponsible as a kid, ran around, caused chaos all the time. I didn't have to learn how to look after other people until that happened. It was a pretty scary experience. Yeah.
What would happen if somebody pulled out of the project and didn't want to do anymore and you'd already chosen the course?
Can you stop them? No. If they don't want to go, you can't force them to go. One of the things that we have to think about when it gets close to actually going is the people that are left are dead set ready to go. Because if one person pulls out, they don't just affect themselves, the whole team has to come out.
Wouldn't you have backup?
So there are backup people, there'd be other teams. Part of the reason why we're selecting 24 people to start learning to train is so you have backup teams that could still go. But if one person pulled out of a team of 4, you have to take the whole team out. Because those 4 people have spent the last 5 or 6 years learning how each other works. They know if someone's thinking this, they're going to go and do that. They know how each other works. So if you lose one person, the entire team of 4 have to come out. So, but that's something you have to think about. That's the option, and that's part of the reason why Mars One tests people so hard to find out how committed they are. We had 200,000 people apply. We're down to 700 now. But Mars One themselves selected just 1,000 people initially to pass through because they were the 1,000 they thought was serious enough. They'll continue to filter it out as we go. So you had to pay for your own medical. You had to pay to apply. Some people didn't want to pay to apply in the first place, so they weren't even part of the 200,000. Some people didn't want to pay for their medical. The medical was a couple of $100s. They didn't, I'm not serious enough. So they got rid of them. We're going to have to fly to probably Sydney to go and do interviews. And then we'll get interviewed to find out how serious we are there. Some people will turn around and go, oh, I can't afford it, or I don't want to, or I'm not serious enough about it. So continuously, they're testing to see how serious people are. Someone new, yeah, up the back.
You know how you have to go in, like, to get to Mars, you have to go in a space shuttle thing. Approximately how big is it?
So for 4 of us, for the 7 or 8 months that it takes to travel from Earth to Mars, we'll have a living space about half of this. So it will be, yeah, it's about half this. So if you close the doors in the middle there, the concertina in the middle, this would be the space that we'd have to live in. And most of that space is still filled with electronics, with food supply, with all sorts of stuff. So our bedroom on the way to Mars is about the same size as a small phone booth. So it's literally, you can stand up inside it and the wall's there. That's your bedroom. And then you've got a bit of extra space to work around from there. Yeah.
How do you get more oxygen?
How do you get more oxygen on Mars? So what we can do is there's water in the soil when we land. Water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. So we can actually split the water using electrolysis, using the energy, the power from the solar panels. We can split it apart. That gives us hydrogen, which we could potentially use as a rocket fuel. So some of the return missions that people have talked about uses that. They generate hydrogen from the soil, and that is then the power, the fuel for their rocket to get home. We're not going to be landing with a rocket to go home. We're there to stay. So you get rid of the hydrogen, and then we've got the oxygen left from there. What's wrong with filling a room purely full of oxygen?
Too much pressure.
Not so much pressure, yeah. That's okay as long as it's oxygen. So when you talk about breathing air in, we breathe in oxygen and nitrogen, and we breathe out oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide. So you breathe in about 21% oxygen, and you breathe out about 16% oxygen. So that you can still recycle air a little bit, but not for long. We need to add the oxygen. The oxygen is what we need. But what's the problem with filling a room entirely of oxygen?
Every time you open up that room, air goes out.
That's okay as well. Yeah?
Well, outside there's no oxygen, and like oxygen, it tends to spread and it has to equalize the pressure on one side and the other, so it doesn't, so it might crush the whole thing.
It won't necessarily crush it, but pressure's a problem. It is a problem. Part of the reason why we build spaceships so strongly is to contain that pressure. So when they go up to the International Space Station, They are at the same atmosphere we are, the same pressure, but outside there's zero pressure. So there's a big differential, there's a big change between the two. That's okay, we can get around that. The reason why we don't fill a room completely full of oxygen, what do you think fire uses? What do you need when you have a fire? You need oxygen. So fire needs heat, fuel and oxygen. If you fill a room entirely full of oxygen, 100% oxygen, it'll explode. Anything above 40% oxygen, and if you have any kind of spark or anything like that, it'll explode as well. I used to work as what's called a technical diver. So you know your scuba divers? I used to do another branch of that called technical diving, where we breathe all kinds of weird and wonderful gases so we can go really, really deep. The deepest dive I ever did was about 90 metres, and the limit for normal diving is 30. So we went a lot further down, but to do that you have to breathe weird gases, you have to do all sorts of things. We would breathe pure oxygen at about 6 metres underwater. But when you were filling that cylinder, you had to be really, really careful. You had to use special greases, you had to use all sorts of things, because if there was any kind of static electricity spark, the cylinder would explode.
With the expandable things on the pods, how do you get the dirt to go over that?
That's an awesome question. That's an absolutely awesome question. What's an idea of how we could do that?
Use shovels.
Shovels, yeah? How long would that take? Ages. Yeah?
Get dirt blocks.
Dirt blocks. So you could make, say, Martian bricks, stack them up. I will leave that. We don't need the picture. It's all right. You could make Martian bricks. That's true. That's a good idea. Yeah.
Use machinery.
Use machinery. Yeah. If we send machinery, don't worry, Jonathan, this is all right. Okay. If we send machinery up there, you have all that weight all over again. So there's issues there. It's a good question. It's a really good question, because we have to solve it. So you see these smooth bits there. That's where the soil is smoothed out over the top. But if you look back over here, looks kind of blocky. It's because of those bricks we were talking about. So you have bricks underneath, and then you can add soil on the top of it. One of the other things we talked about with the wind before, you get the big sandstorms on Mars. So any sand that you stack on the top may get swept away. And what you end up with is a lump on one side and it's scalloped out on the other, where the wind has stacked the sand up on one side and swept it away on the other side. And that starts to cause problems with how it gets squashed, how the sand sits on top, all sorts of things. So it is a really, really, really good question. Yep. Would you take a doctor to Mars?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that's a really obvious answer. What's the point of taking a doctor to Mars? If you got sick, you got really, really sick, this comes down to these adult decisions again. If someone got really, really sick and you were spending all your time looking after them to try and keep them alive, rather than looking after the rest of the base, you have to make a decision. Maybe you're using all your resources to keep one person alive. Ideally, we would send 4 doctors. And we would send 4 engineers, and we'd send 4 pilots, and everyone would be trained in everything. Who here has heard of MacGyver? Yeah. So you'd want to send MacGyver. You want to send 4 MacGyvers with you. They can do everything. They can fix this, they can do surgery, fly planes, all sorts of stuff. We want to try and train 4 MacGyvers up to go to Mars, ideally. But some people will be better at being a doctor, some people are better at being an engineer, all those sort of things. So it would be great to take a doctor, it would be great to take 4 doctors, but it all comes down to the kind of people that we get that apply and how they work. What would be better, maybe better than sending 1 doctor, would be to send 4 paramedics. People who are trained not to be really specialised doctors, Because if you need to, if it's some long-term illness, you can always send a message back to Earth and find out from a doctor, or lots of doctors back on Earth. It would be better to have 4 people who are really well trained to respond to emergencies rather than sending one person who is a trained doctor.
Because like you'd be getting 4 people from all around the world, you'd all have to know the same language.
Yes.
So what language? And like how long would you spend trying to study it?
What language would you guys choose if you were going to be picking people to go to Mars? English? That's the decision. Why though? Why would you pick English? Yeah.
Well, there's in the world today. There's like the 3 main languages: English, and then you got the Spanish and their dialects, and then there's the Chinese language. So like of those 3 mains, you would choose one of them, and then like English is known in more countries, where Chinese is known and Spanish is known by the regions of people and the people. So English is more worldwide.
Yep. So in terms of sheer number of people who speak a particular language, the most is Chinese, because there's 1 billion Chinese people. The next one after that, Arabic. Why would Arabic be the next language that, because there's not just one, there's not like one Arab country. Yeah?
There's a whole Middle East,
True.
which
Very true.
speak Arabic or different dialects of it.
Yeah, they all do speak different dialects. Why would it be Arabic?
Because Arabic is used in many countries.
Yeah, there's a reason for it though. There's a reason why it's used in many countries.
To learn?
Arabic is probably the 2nd hardest language in the world to learn. I lived in Jordan for 2 years. I can try assure you it's one of the hardest languages you will ever try and learn ever.
Is it because of the book
Because of the... Yeah, exactly. So Arabic is the language of the Quran, which is what all Muslims learn. And they all have to learn a particular type of Arabic from it called classical Arabic. It's a different dialect. Who was talking about dialects just before? Yeah, it's a different dialect from what you hear in, say, Indonesia or Jordan or Saudi Arabia. Even inside of Jordan, where I lived, they have different dialects of Arabic, but all Muslims learn to read Arabic from the same text, from the Quran. So that's a common language. The reason why we use English, I'll save yous. The reason why we use English is exactly the reason why you were talking about before. There's lots of people who learn Mandarin, Chinese language, Arabic, Indonesian, lots of different, like Spanish, French, all these different languages. But usually English is the 2nd language they learn, because then they can watch TV shows, then they can read English newspapers, they can do all these sort of things. So while it's not the most commonly spoken language as a first language, it is by far the 2nd most common language that people speak. It's also the television language of choice. So the US, who make huge television shows, all speak English.
What's the time difference in Mars?
Time difference with Mars. Okay, there's a couple of ways to answer that. One of them is the time delay that it takes to go from Mars to Earth, which varies. That's that 4 to 20 minutes that I was talking about before. Mars also orbits around the Sun about every 22 months. So it's almost 2 years. So for Earth goes around almost twice as quickly as Mars does. Mars also rotates, and it rotates at a slightly different speed to what we do here on Earth. So we have 24 hours. Mars has 24 and a half hours. You know all this, don't you? There we go. Yeah. There's a slightly different rotation. So there's a bit of a time difference there, but it all comes down to how you want to define time. So, who else is... yeah. Yep.
What about children?
What about children? We're going to be sending a team of 4 up. Would you send all guys? No. Would you send all girls? No. Would you send 2 and 2?
Yes.
Why wouldn't you send 4 guys?
Because
I'll make it simple for you. What happens when we get 4 guys together? They usually break something or they fight. What happens when you get 4 girls together? Have a cat fight. Yeah. What you tend to find if you get 2 guys and 2 girls together, they've done this in Antarctica. They've done tests before. Well, it wasn't a deliberate test. It was a bit of an accident. There was a Antarctic station about 2 years ago that sent 35 people down to an isolated place called Concordia, and they set the whole thing up, and they sent 35 male researchers ready to go. And the same thing you talked about before, where one person pulled out, at the last minute, 2 weeks before, someone got sick, they pulled them out, and they replaced the guy with 1 girl. It nearly destroyed the whole station, nearly destroyed the whole thing because it was complete chaos. If you put a bunch of guys together, yeah, they'll do stupid things and rah rah, but they usually won't end up actually killing each other. But if they're competing for the attention of a girl, often they probably will try and kill each other. So you need to have even. You need to have 2 guys and 2 girls, so that it's balanced it out. If you put all guys, they'll probably fight and mess around and all that sort of stuff. If you put all girls, they'll probably fight and mess, all that sort of thing. If you put an imbalance between men and women, people will try and kill each other. If you put a balance of 2 guys and 2 girls, or 4 guys and 4 girls, or whatever as the colony builds up, they keep each other in check. So the guys don't do stupid things to impress the other guys. They behave themselves and they do the right thing to impress the girls. The girls don't get into cat fights to fight over individual men because there's an even match of men. So there's a balance. So the guys and the girls have to balance each other out. There's different dynamics and they work together to do that. Your original question, though, was about kids. So about kids, we would send 2 guys and 2 girls, but the first 3 or 4 crews, so the first 12 to 6, leave it. First 12 to 16 people that go won't have kids. So I'll never have a kid. I'll never have children, ever. I'm not that attached to you, trust me. I'll never have kids. Why wouldn't the first crews have kids?
Because there would only be allowed 1 person in 1 pod.
So yeah, we've got restriction of resources. That's one issue.
It would be too much to deal with.
Too much to deal with, yeah. It's the resources thing again, yeah.
I've done some I did some research into that, and actually, for the fetus to grow, it's not possible.
Pretty much. So we've got resources. What the research that you're talking about has to do with checking how plants grow on the International Space Station, and they can't fertilise properly. They can't even, like right at the start with the cells and the eggs, it doesn't even fertilise properly in 0G. We don't know what would happen in 1/3 gravity or 38% gravity. We don't know, because no one's ever gone before. No one's ever tried to make a baby in 38% gravity. So, and we don't know what that baby would look like either. We don't. Part of the way that your bodies grow and the way that your bodies develop has to do with gravity. So, you know, I was talking about bones being brittle and things like that. The baby is going to be growing up in 38% of that. So you don't know, it could end up being a jelly baby with a little weak baby. Would you want to raise a baby in a tiny little capsule? No. That could end up being a jelly baby as well. So, answering your question, the first people won't have babies, and there's a really good chance that because of radiation and things like that, the first crews that go won't ever be able to have children ever. but those first crews will do experiments to find out whether or not the people who come along afterwards do the same plant experiments that you were talking about, to try and find out whether or not the babies will be jelly babies, whether or not they'll be all that sort of stuff. So for the first groups, we'll be there to find out. It's answering those questions. So, yeah.
I got two.
Well, I'll give you one.
Yeah, I got
The best one.
over like 100 years, or would there be like shops there and like?
Why not? Why not? So we're talking about our organisation's Mars One. There are other organisations trying to send people to Mars as well. There is a man by the name of Elon Musk who runs a organisation, a company called SpaceX. He's making rockets. He's building the capsules that we're making, but he has his own company as well. And he's talking about building a spaceship that would send 500 people to Mars in one go. 500 people all in one go. It's called the Mars Colonial Transporter. He's coming up with it, he's developing it now, and he desperately wants, his plan is that he wants to die on Mars, just not on impact. He wants to live out the rest of his life on Mars, and he wants to get humanity onto Mars. So eventually we'll have shops. Eventually, I would hope that when we go to Mars, we don't take some of the stuff that we've done here on Earth. So rather than trying to dig up coal or oil on Mars or anything like that, we do the renewables that you were talking about. We take all the best lessons that we've had on Earth and we apply it to Mars when we go. That would be the ideal thing. So maybe not shops, maybe not money. All sorts of questions. These are sort of things that the first people who go have to try and work out, and it grows from there.
How much did you have to go through to get this far?
How much did I...
How much did you have to go through to get this far?
To get this far, okay. Like I said, when I found out about this, I was living in the UK. I was living in the United Kingdom. I was working as a full-time comic. I had just done my third comedy show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is the biggest comedy festival in the world. And I was trying to work out where to go next, so this came along. I had a gorgeous girlfriend who I loved very, very dearly. I loved living in the UK. Yeah, a lot of different things. To get where I am now, technically all I had to do was fill in an application form, pay my money, and do a medical. What I've really gone through is I've completely changed who I am as a person. I still have the same core values that I've always had, but I've had to change and adapt so that the skills that I had previously now better suit what I want to do. This is what I want to do, so I've had to use what I've already got to make it happen. So I left my girlfriend, and she understands that. We still stay in touch, but she knows that for me to really commit to doing this, I couldn't stay in the UK. I couldn't stay there. I needed to be able to commit to doing this properly. I still love her very much, but I couldn't be with her and do this at the same time. I had to give up doing comedy because people don't take you seriously if you work as a stand-up comic. You dress up as a koala and then you want to talk to them about going to Mars. So yeah, I've changed a lot. I have been through a lot over the last 2 years or so, but I still know that this is really, really important. So hope that answers best you can. Yeah.
What was your primary reason for signing up for the project?
I was writing a comedy show about sending people one way to Mars. Seriously. Deadly serious. I had been planning to write a comedy show about sending people to Mars for about 2 years. I thought it was a great idea. I was sad that we hadn't really left low Earth orbit. We'd never gone beyond the International Space Station since 1972. So that's 42 years ago now. I was sad that that was the case. I was sad that that was the way that things had turned out. And I wanted to write a comedy show where I was a little bit angry about humanity not going any further, that we'd just stopped there. We'd gone so far, we'd gone to the moon, and then we'd scurried back and we'd never gone any further. That's the koala's just when I'm angry. Yeah. I wanted to write a comedy show about the idea that we could send people one way to Mars, that it would be much cheaper, much easier to do that. And while I was researching it, I'd been sitting in a coffee shop in Brighton for about 10 minutes on the internet, at a Starbucks. And I was typing in Mars one way and finding these articles, and then all of a sudden I found a website called mars-1.com. And I looked at it and I went, oh wow, these guys announced their existence 3 days ago. All of a sudden, I'm not just going to write a comedy show about why we should be going to Mars. I'm going to write a comedy show about how we are going to Mars, and I'm going to be part of it. So, and I did that for National Science Week last year. I wrote a comedy show called Mars Needs Guitars about why would it be Mars needs guitars? Ukulele story, yeah, very true. That's one element of it. I'll make it easy for you. We're sending 4 people. What are most rock bands composed of? 4 people. So you've got your drummer, your bass guitarist, your lead guitarist, and your singer. And those 4 personalities, you have 4 different personalities for a band. Those 4 personalities are very similar to personalities we need to send to people. We need people to go with to Mars. So it was basing a show around looking at the different personalities and making it topical with the rock guitar stuff. Someone I haven't spoken to yet. Behind you, yeah.
Do you have to wear the suit every
So every time we go outside, you have to wear the suit. With the reason why we wear the suit is going back to what you talked about before, because of the low pressure. There is a certain point when we go up into the atmosphere, if we go up in balloons and planes and things like that, there's a point where, when I was on Mount Kilimanjaro, on the top of it, if you tried to boil water up there, it didn't boil at 100 degrees, it boiled at about 80 degrees, because there was lower pressure. Because you're up so high, there's less pressure. So there is a point where you go up high enough where the water on your tongue, the water in your eyes and all that stuff starts to boil off. Just normally. Yeah, pretty disgusting. Yeah. That's the same thing that happens in space. And that's the same thing that happens when you go onto the surface of Mars. There's not enough pressure to hold that water in, so it boils away. So anytime we go outside, you have to wear your suits. But when you're inside the capsule, when you're inside the habitat, that's fine. Yeah.
After a few years, when there's more people there, how are you going to find the resources to get gas and things like that?
So gas as in like breathing gas and...
I mean, like gas that you need to cook things.
Cooking stuff. Okay, cool. So how do they cook stuff on the International Space Station? Who said that? They don't. You're right, they don't. They heat stuff up. They use little heaters, electric heaters and things like that, but they don't have gas. Gas is really dangerous because A, it can explode. B, if it's not set up right, you can't smell it and it can actually knock people out and they can pass out. So they don't cook it properly. They heat it up in little heating packs and things like that. But what you're talking about is resources. So as more people get there, you're going to have shortages of resources. What we're going to do is we're sending what's called redundancy. So before anyone leaves Earth, there is already a completely set up base that's growing food, that's generating water, that's generating oxygen, all that sort of stuff. Once that's set, then the first team of 4 will go. And when they go, they will take with them all of the equipment that you would need for the next lot of people. So they would then spend 2 years being able to set everything up. If something goes wrong, if something explodes or whatever, they have the next crew's set of stuff already. The next crew stays on Earth for another 2 years or whatever. They send more resources up. You've always got backup. So it's kind of like if you're going into a test and you take one pencil and no sharpener. and you're riding along and pencil snaps and you can't fix it. So the idea being you take, with Mars 1, what we're talking about is not just taking 2 pencils with you, we're talking about taking 4 pencils with you and a sharpener and another sharpener as well in case your first sharpener breaks. That's how much extra stuff there is. And when the next group of people come, they turn up with another 4 pencils and 2 more sharpeners as well. So there's lots of extra redundancy. It's extra stuff. It seems like a waste, but it's in case things go wrong, because there's no way to get home. Yeah. Yeah.
Are you actually going to
Am I actually going? I hope so. No, I laugh. It's not because it's a silly question at all. It is a good question. I laugh because it reflects that people don't believe it's maybe happening. And that's understandable. It's something we've never ever done before. To give you an idea, when they first built steam engines, like the trains, the steam trains, people were concerned that when they got up to high speed, when they went at 100 mile an hour, the people on board would go mad. They thought that was going to happen because they didn't know, because they thought there's no way human beings could ever handle going that fast. Part of exploring is about going and doing stuff that no one's ever done before. And people will tell you that it's not possible, or you'll go crazy, or you'll die, or whatever. But people have to try it. People have to explore, and we're always trying to find new limits. The reason why we have new science and new engineering, lots of stuff, is because people are finding new limits, and then they find ways to get around those limits. So I hope I'm going, but I can't promise that I'm going. No one could promise. I might get all the way through training and be climbing into the capsule at the last minute and go, actually, I don't think this is the best thing to do. I don't think I would ever do that for reasons of myself, but if there was something that came up where I decided it was in the highest and best interest of humanity for me not to go, if it was more important that someone else went, then I would suggest they go. It's not about me. Like, this isn't about anyone. And I think coming back to, someone was asking before about how serious, where I was talking about how filtering out how serious people are. I think the really, really serious people are the ones who realise that it's bigger than them. It's not about... I know a couple of people who have applied who are using it as a way to boost their career in acting, or to do different things like that to boost themselves, because they want to be a star. They want to be... You guys running up to me, like getting me to sign stuff. I feel really uncomfortable with that because I don't think I'm special. I've put my hand up to do something that is really, really special, but I'm just one of 700 people that are still in the running. And even when I got down to those 4, if I got down to those 4 people, I would still think that the only thing that made me special was I put my hand up to do it. So I hope I go. I don't know if I will go. And really, it's not important if I go. It's important that someone goes. I hope that helps. Still trying to search for new people. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt. We'll probably have about 5 more minutes to go.
5 more minutes, okay. We can shorten this up.
Put your hands down if you've asked a question, please.
Yeah. That will help me a lot.
It's to my understanding that like matter can, when they collide, like matter and antimatter can cause a amount of energy depending on its size. If there was enough matter to cause another Big Bang, and it was to collide with our universe, would the universes mix together, or would one crumble?
You're delving into some pretty hardcore cosmology there, and I tell you what, how about I talk to you about that afterwards, because that's less to do with what we're doing with Mars, and that's some really hardcore physics, but that's cool though, really cool. Yeah.
If someone died in the shuttle, would you just send them out for the shuttle?
Maybe. What's the point of carrying, like, it's just a body. This is the same thing that we were talking about before about like it not being important that it's me. We get really, really attached to who we are as people, all that sort of thing, our bodies, what happens to us afterwards. We have to be super practical when it comes to Mars One. So there's a possibility we could use them as fertiliser. But if we couldn't, then it would be the better thing to do. What would you do otherwise? You'd keep them around in the capsule. Yeah.
Well, you'd eat them. Cook him and pull off his fingers.
I tell you what. There's a reason why we don't eat people, and it's really practical. It's not just because it's disgusting. The reason why we don't eat people is because the brain matter, the stuff that we have inside our brains, there's little particles inside called prions. Who's ever heard of mad cow disease? Yeah? Yeah. Mad cow disease, CJD, is caused by the prions that are in brain matter. It's caused by the brain matter in cows. It also is in the brain matter of human beings, and it causes people to go crazy. So when they talk about crazy cannibals and things like that, it's because they have a genuine mental sickness from these little particles working their way into the brain as well. So that's why we don't eat people. Now you know. You had one at the back? Someone had their hand up there a second ago. No? Cool. Looking for new? Yeah, right at the back. Yep. The water comes straight out of the soil. So what we can do is we can heat up the soil. We dig up big scoops of soil, put it in an oven. The water boils off. We catch that steam, let it condense out, and then we can drink it, and we dump the soil back out again. So you're extracting it straight out of the soil. I'm going to speed questions now. Yes.
So when people first came to Australia, they were thinking of setting up as a jail because like there was kind of jail. So I was thinking at Mars because like sometimes the jails are overcrowding here as well. Do you reckon that in the future there might be jails on Mars for that? Because like the really bad people, like they go to Mars but they'll never come back. So like an extreme jail.
When they sent people here as a jail, as convicts, they arrived thinking that it was a jail because it was different from England, really. That's what it boiled down to. If you look about it in practical terms, how much nicer is living in Australia than it is in England? A lot. The weather's much nicer, there's lots of animals around here, it's much easier to farm, there's a lot more space. Mars, in many ways, is the same. We have real concerns that Earth is maybe getting overcrowded, that we can't sustain the number of people that we have. There's every possibility that Earth it has too many people on it. That's a real worry that scientists have in the next 10 to 15 years. People talk about using Mars. It's pretty extreme, and people see it as a jail sentence or a death sentence or whatever, but really it's an opportunity. It's a whole new world. We could discover and explore all kinds of things. I'm going to scoop through, yep.
Will you be nervous?
Terrified. I will be. I'll be saying goodbye to my family, my friends. I'll be strapping myself onto a rocket that's got a couple of million kilograms of explosives on the back of it. I'll be hurtling through space for 7 or 8 months with going beyond anywhere any human ever has been. You'd be terrified because it's so different. But what's important is you recognise that you'll be scared and you do it anyway. Someone much wiser than me once said that courage is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And in many ways, that's what this is about. It's about knowing all the risks, knowing how scary it is, and going, no, this is important, I'm going to do it. Dun, 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 you with, yeah.
Something really bad happened on Mars. Did they try and get you back to Earth so you wouldn't die?
No. Because you can't. There's no way to do it. But I'm sure they would love to have people back. I'm sure we'd all love to go to Mars and come back if it was easy. Who would go to Mars now if it was easy and they could go there and come back and explore it? All of you, yeah. But it's not easy. It's really, really, really hard. So we're going with no return ticket. You're literally going and what I used to call paratrooping in. You drop in and you just have to make do with what you've got. If things go wrong, things go wrong. That's That's life, unfortunately. It's, again, being a MacGyver. It's adapt, adjust, and evolve with what's going on. In the middle there. No, behind you. Yep.
Are you going to use knife and forks?
Who's heard of a spork? Yeah! So I never used, when I was in the army and with the commandos, I never used a knife and fork. We would have one plastic spoon fork thing that we would use. And you'd literally eat your food out of a plastic bag. And that was the way it was. You have to reduce. So you don't want to take a knife and a fork, you take something that does both. We've got one more?
Yeah, maybe one more.
One more?
Well, you're pretty much giving up your entire life to go to Mars, but what will you do if you aren't picked to go to Mars?
If I'm not picked, I'll support the people who go. Like I said before, this is much bigger than me. This is about being involved with something that's absolutely huge, and it's about our entire species, not just Australians, not just Americans or Indians or wherever, every human being involved in going and doing something that we've never done before. So me actually going would be cool, no doubt, but I would always support it. So for instance, if I got kicked out, we've got interviews later in the year where I go and speak to the selection committee. If I got kicked out, the first thing I would do is I'd be signing up to do my Masters with the International Space University. The shirt I'm wearing is a course that I did from the International Space University earlier this year. Had a fantastic time, met some really amazing people who work in the space industry. I would go and do that. And I'd go and work in the space industry to support the people who are going to Mars. So hopefully Mars One would keep me on so that I could keep doing things like this, talking to school kids.
All right,
Cool.
fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. That was awesome. You were awesome.